Hi, and welcome to Early Retirement Roadmap, the show where I help you prepare for and thrive in early retirement. When I retired at 55, I thought I'd already answered the big question, did I have enough money? And I did. But after the paycheck stopped, I realized there was another question I had not spent nearly enough time talking about. Where's that money and what can it actually do for me? A large 401k does not automatically make early retirement easy because you can have a large 401k and still make early retirement harder than it needs to be. Now, don't get me wrong, a 401k is a fantastic wealth building tool. I maxed ours out for years, but it cannot perform every job an early retiree needs. In fact, the money outside my 401k was what gave me the flexibility to actually stop working at 55. So today, I'm walking through the 5 problems our 401ks alone could not solve, plus the tax problem I'm still planning around right now. Before I retired, I was almost entirely focused on the total. Was it big enough? Was it growing fast enough? Now, I did a great job saving. What I didn't think about nearly enough was where every dollar actually lived and how I'd eventually get it out. Thankfully, my habits had already built a decent mix without the master plan. I was fortunate there. We maxed out our 401ks each year. Once that was done, any extra savings went into a taxable brokerage account and building a solid cash runway. And when we qualified, we contributed to Roth accounts too, although as our income grew with our careers, we went past the limit for direct Roth IRA contributions, so more of that after-tax savings shifted to the brokerage account. I only appreciated how valuable that mix was, though, until after I actually retired. Now, a couple of quick disclaimers. Remember that this podcast is not personalized financial, tax, or legal investment advice. And this is not an anti-401k or anti-403b episode. And for the sake of simplicity, whenever I talk in this episode about a traditional 401k account, know that what I'm saying really applies to traditional 403b accounts too. Now, I still think these can be one of the best tools available for building retirement wealth. You may get an employer match, an immediate tax benefit, automatic investing, and access to low-cost funds. That's a pretty great package, but my point is narrower. A 401k is excellent at being, well, a 401k, but it's not built to also be your early retirement bridge, your health insurance strategy, your market crash shock absorber, and your tax control system all at once. And therein lies the problems for early retirees. So let's get into 5 problems if most of my retirement wealth was in our 401ks alone. The first problem is access at the age I wanted to retire at. Now, the retirement system is based on age. 55 for the rule of 55. 59 and a half is generally when the 10% early withdrawal penalty stops applying to retirement account distributions. 62 for the earliest Social Security claim, 65 for Medicare, and eventually required minimum distributions will kick in. For me, it will be at age 75. But the problem is none of these clocks start on the day you decide you're done working. The rule of 55 helps some people I know retire early. A couple of friends, a cousin. In general, if you leave an employer during or after the year you turn 55, distributions from that employer's plan may skip the 10% early withdrawal penalty. You'll still own regular income tax, and the details depend on the plan, and it generally doesn't apply once the money's rolled into an IRA. But it wasn't my bridge. When I decided to retire early, I hadn't been at my current employer long enough to build a really good 401k balance that could fund early retirement on its own. What made it possible was actually my taxable brokerage account, which I could withdraw from at liberty with no age requirement and had a great pool of money in there so that would support our early retirement. So this is the first lesson to be aware of. Having enough money to retire early and having enough accessible money that you qualify for by age, or you have enough in an account that has no age restrictions, like the taxable brokerage account I had, are what really matters. You can have enough money, but the question is if it's in accessible accounts you can pull from without any sort of penalty. The second problem with the 401k is having the ability to control my reported income for health insurance before Medicare. This is where the taxable brokerage account I have really shines. ACA marketplace subsidies are based on household modified adjusted gross income, or MAGI. When I sell from a taxable account to fund my retirement, I can choose which shares to sell, generally picking higher cost basis shares first because only the gain counts as income, not the full sale amount. That's very different from a traditional 401k withdrawal where the whole distribution is generally taxable and it's also taxed under the ordinary income tax brackets used for wages rather than at the preferential long-term capital gains rates. Conversely, when I sell investments from my taxable brokerage account, the entire sale amount does not count as income, only the gain above my cost basis. And if I held those investments for more than a year, that gain is generally taxed at better long term capital gains rates rather than as ordinary income. And depending on my total income for the year, the federal tax rate on that gain could potentially be zero. In fact, in keeping our income low enough to qualify for ACA subsidies, there is a very good chance that our long term capital gains would also fall within the 0% federal capital gains bracket. But here's one important distinction. Even a capital gain taxed at 0% still counts as income when the marketplace calculates potential ACA subsidies. So the taxable brokerage account does not make reported income just disappear for ACA health insurance. But what this account does give me is much more control. Instead of every dollar I withdraw counting as income, only the gain portion of what I sell may increase my MAGI as well as any dividends I receive. And that's very important when it comes to getting ACA subsidies. It also means I might be able to generate considerably more spending money while reporting considerably less reported and taxable income. And during the years before Medicare, that flexibility is enormously valuable. The third problem is surviving a market downturn without being forced to sell at the worst possible time. I built a cash runway that could cover roughly 4 years of our planned spending. I know 4 years will sound excessive to some people, and that's fine. Personal finance is just that, personal, and this is what enables me to sleep very well at night and pretty much ignore the whims of the stock market. And of course, there is some logic why I built this solid cash runway to cover me for 4 years before I retired. It's because historically, the average bear market has lasted around 10 months, but that only measures the decline from the market's previous high to the bottom. It does not include the additional time the market may need to climb all the way back to where it started. Looking at the entire journey from the previous market high through the decline and back to a full recovery, one historical analysis found a median of about 28 months. Now, that number varies depending on the period study and how recovery is measured, and some recoveries have taken considerably longer. So, my 4 year runway was not chosen because I believe every downturn will be over within 4 years. History, of course, makes no such promise. I chose it because it gives me a substantial cushion beyond what a typical bear market and recovery have historically required and what I'm comfortable with. And this matters because of something called sequence of returns risk. When you are still working and contributing money, a market decline can actually help you because you are buying investments at lower prices. But once you retire and begin withdrawing money, the situation changes. If I am forced to sell stocks after they have fallen significantly, I lock in those losses. I also sell more shares to produce the same amount of spending money, leaving fewer shares invested to participate in the eventual recovery. And if that happens during the first several years of retirement, it can create lasting damage to the portfolio, even if the market's long term average return eventually looks perfectly normal. My cash runway is designed to greatly reduce the likelihood that I will have to do that. Along with the cash, I also keep a bond cushion as another less volatile safety net. Together, they give me options. If stocks are down, I can spend from cash rather than selling them at depressed prices. If a downturn lasts longer than expected, the bonds provide an additional layer of flexibility and protection. The important part for me is not predicting exactly how long the next downturn will last. It's knowing that I should not have to sell stocks at severely depressed prices just to pay my bills. My cash runway buys time for the market to recover and gives me a lot of peace of mind, and it prevents me from reacting emotionally when the market does drop. When the markets do recover, I can sell investments and begin refilling the runway. Now, I know, of course, that holding that much cash does have a cost. It will probably earn less than stocks over time. Believe me, I am well aware of that and accept that trade off because the runway is not there to maximize returns. Its job is to protect the rest of the plan, reduce sequence of returns risk, and keep me from becoming my portfolio's biggest risk emotionally during a bad market. Okay, problem number four with only having a 401k. It doesn't give tax flexibility alone from one year to the next. If almost everything I owned was pre-tax, every withdrawal would create taxable income, no way around it. But thankfully, with cash, the taxable brokerage account, Roth money, and traditional retirement accounts like our 401ks and IRAs, we actually have choices. Some years I can lean on cash or sell high cost basis shares. Other years, especially once we're on Medicare, I might pull from a pre-tax account or do a Roth conversion instead while staying in a given tax bracket. These different accounts give me different control knobs for my retirement planning. The brokerage account gives me access now, cash gives me stability and peace of mind. Roth money grows tax free for later. Four different tools, four different jobs, and each one behaves differently at tax time. Problem number five, a 401k only plan can pressure you to claim Social Security earlier. The fifth problem is not Social Security itself, and it's not that a 401k somehow prevents me from delaying Social Security. The problem is what could happen if nearly all of our retirement money were concentrated in our 401ks. Every year you delay Social Security in retirement, of course, you still need money to live on. If a 401k were my only meaningful source of retirement income, then delaying Social Security would require me to take larger withdrawals from the 401k year after year. At some point, it could become tempting to claim Social Security early, not because claiming early is the best long term decision, but simply because the monthly check would reduce how much I needed to withdraw from the 401k. Having money outside the 401k gives me another way to fund the bridge years before Medicare and prior to taking Social Security. I can use cash and carefully selected sales from the taxable brokerage account to cover part of our spending without making every dollar show up as ordinary income in order to maintain ACA subsidies. Those other accounts also give me more control over when I choose to begin Social Security. For me, delaying Social Security is valuable because the benefit increases the longer I wait up to age 70. It also provides a larger inflation adjusted income stream later in life. And I want delayed Social Security to be a choice, not something where I feel forced to claim earlier just to relieve pressure on the portfolio. Money outside the 401k helps create that choice. All right, so far, these problems have mostly been about creating flexibility during the early years of retirement, but concentrating too much money in pre-tax accounts like 401ks and IRAs can create an entirely different set of problems later on as well. It's when you have a very large amount of money sitting in pre-tax accounts. We have a substantial amount in these, and that's not a bad problem. It means we saved a lot and collected years of tax deductions. But under current law, required minimum distributions or RMDs will kick in at 75 for someone my age, whether I need the money that year or not. The problem with this is those required withdrawals can push me into a higher tax bracket and generally 2 years later, potentially raise my Medicare premiums through IRMAA. But honestly, the tax isn't even what bothers me most, although believe me, I'm not happy about that either. What bothers me most is losing control over when income shows up. That's part of why Roth conversions may be in our future, but conversions have to be balanced against marketplace subsidies right now, increasing Medicare premiums later due to IRMAA, and today's tax brackets against tomorrow's. For today, the point is simpler. Stacking everything into pre-tax accounts may mean creating a later problem with RMDs. So looking back, do I wish I'd put less into the 401ks and even more into the brokerage account? Maybe, and I mean that honestly. It's easy for retired me to look backward with information working me didn't have. The deductions were real, the employer benefits were real, and the money grew. But I do wish I'd asked the question sooner. Was maxing every pre-tax account always the right call? Or would sending a bit more toward taxable accounts have been better? Before I retired, I mostly asked one question: how much do I have? After I retired, I started asking three more, especially: where is it? When can I use it? And what happens to my taxes when I do? Those questions matter most if you're planning to retire before 59 and a half, before Social Security, or before Medicare. A retirement calculator can confirm you have enough in total and still miss that the money is sitting in accounts that make the first decade or more of early retirement awkward, expensive, or inflexible. So, if you're still building your retirement plan, here are 5 questions I'd ask before putting your savings on autopilot. One, what money will actually pay your bills between your retirement date and the ages when other income kicks in? Two, how will withdrawals from each account affect your taxable income? And if you retire before Medicare, your health insurance costs if you plan to be on ACA health insurance. Three, how long would you plan for covering spending without selling stocks during a market downturn and recovery? Fourth, do you have a real mix of pre-tax, taxable, tax-free, and cash, or is nearly everything riding on one set of tax rules? Five, are today's deductions quietly setting you up for RMDs and higher Medicare premiums in the future? Here's where I've landed and what I want to leave you with. The location of my money mattered almost as much as the amount. The 401k and IRAs definitely help to build the wealth. The brokerage account built the bridge. The cash gives me peace of mind. The Roth accounts give me flexibility, especially later, and since qualified Roth withdrawals are tax free, I would ideally like to let those accounts continue growing as long as possible. So each type of account has a job, and no single account can do all of them at once. And if you really want to work through this yourself, I've got free retirement planning tools on my Patreon, including my cash runway worksheet, CD, and treasury ladder guides if you want them to be part of your cash runway strategy, and my AC Manji estimator. Links are in the description or show notes, and you may also want to consider becoming a paid member. If you do, you'll get early access to new podcast episodes, ad-free listening, and the best part, our private community discussion space where you can ask your questions about early retirement or learn from those that have already retired early, including me. Lastly, go to mikeupland.com for all of my media. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take care and make the most of today.